very much. High level of excitement in the room, I can tell. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'll just invite Mr. Tupera to open the meeting. Thank you.
Mino tātou reda spray, hei mua koe a mātou I hoa, hei tuhutu I a mātou mahi katoa. Ko koe anō hoki hei whakakahi a mātou, kia whai krori ai koe a mātou mahi katoa. He mea timata, he mea mahi, he mea whakoti roto I a koe. Kia whiwhia hoki mātou ki tō roto nui te mea ata whai tēnei e koe. Ko I karate hoki tō mātou ariki, āmine. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Mr. Tupera. Thank you to members of council officers, and someone from as visitors. Thank you for that. For those who aren't aware, there's a number of NZTA staff, and we welcome Linda Stewart, who will be taking over from Emma Spate as the NZTA person. Shortly, we'll hear from Linda in a moment. We have apologies from Campbell Gilmore and an apology for lateness from Councillor Kerry Worsnop. Welcome to the Mayor who's joined us this afternoon. So would someone please move those apologies be accepted? Thank you. Moved Councillor Burdett and seconded Councillor Cranston. The apology for Campbell Gilmore and a late apology for Councillor Worsnop. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? I should welcome other councillors to the meeting today. Again, council's been in meeting this morning, and councillors were invited to come back today, this afternoon, to listen to the discussions around the Regional Land Transport Plan. So we move to item 3, which is the confirmation of the non-confidential minutes, which is on page 4 at the meeting of the 11th of February. Move Councillor Burdett. Did I hear? Yes. Seconded Ms. Spate. Thank you very much. I'll put that to the meeting. All those in favour that they be signed as a true and correct record, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Just a couple of questions that I asked Mr. Wilson to respond to the request. Thank you. From Ms. Ward on behalf of Mothers Living in Lytton Road, which, if you recall, was a presentation, welcome Ms. Ward, to us last time. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Through you, Madam Chair. So staff have been out and had a look at the accessway under Lytton Road. It's not something we have budget available for in this financial year or next. However, we do have funding included in the LTP for the Tarehuru walking and cycleway, and that will be the process to pick up that crossing underneath that bridge.
Thank you. And there's one further item from the minutes. At item 10.2, it appears on page 5 of the minutes, which was with respect to, and a matter the Mayor raised with us last time, no right-hand turn into the Esplanade, and the fact that that was proceeding, and I'll ask Ms. Spate to respond to that, please. It's in the minutes of the last meeting.
Yes, you hopefully will have seen a media report that work is going to be underway. So we'll have our team out there on Saturday morning doing the final surveying work, and the work will be in ground on Tuesday, and it's scheduled to be finished on Friday. So really pleased to be getting that work all completed, and we'll make it very clear where traffic's supposed to go for the future.
Question, Emma, just about that area, you're alluding to the right-hand turn there, but that whole Gladstone Road Bridge, and we've discussed this before, are there any plans going forward? Because I remember it was 2009 when we had the 250 where that was going to be resealed. Are there any plans in the next while where that will be resealed and where we can have a discussion about the railing on the one side, which I think we can tidy up maybe together, or we'll talk about what we can do there over Gladstone Road Bridge? So Oliver, that's fantastic, and yay. Just another discussion is, you know how you replace the railing on the right-hand side, which looks absolutely beautiful. Are there discussions to do something on the left-hand side? And if there's not a budget, can we at least paint it?
In terms of removing the concrete sides, that it's a heritage structure because it's one of the very few bridges of its type, which is why we had to go through such an extensive process to do the rails on the other side. And part of that was agreeing to keep the concrete structure on that side. In terms of painting, that's actually, it's quite a challenging process because once we paint it, the upkeep then becomes very expensive because any further cleaning of a painted surface requires full capture of any water that comes off it. So there's quite significant environmental management and cost associated with doing that. So I'm sure we can have some further conversations about maintaining it, but there are some quite significant issues that we do have to include in consideration.
So I understand that and I respect that, and I know it cost a lot of money, but that's a discussion we really would like to have, because that precinct is just beautified with the walkway and everything happened there. And the left-hand side of the bridge is just an eyesore at this stage. So yes, please, we would love to have a discussion to see. I can tell you once a week, someone contacts me about that. So it is a priority for lots of people because that area is looking so beautifully. It just looked unfinished. Thank you.
Are there any further matters arising from the minutes that anyone wishes to raise? No? Thank you. Then we move to the action sheet. Would you like to report on the meetings that you had up the coast with respect to stock control? And I'd just like to say, Ms. Spade, it was really disappointing that the two councillors from the coast were not invited to those meetings that Whakakotahi had in Ruatoria. It makes it look like we're not interested. Is there any update? I mean, if you look on page 11, on our agenda, it was an up-and-coming item. Is there anything you wish to share with us subsequent to your meetings?
So we did extend the invites to councillors. Council staff turned up and were actively involved in the conversation. We've sent around an action plan which has gone to the community and the working party members, and there's some actions on there on the stock issue up around the coast.
Has it got better? I mean, is there less stock on the road? Are you monitoring it? How are you telling?
We haven't got the numbers in front of me, so I don't know if it's got better. Ideally, stock owners would be taking more active management and keeping their stock on their properties. But at the moment, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, so I don't know if it's got better.
Have you had any feedback subsequent to the meeting?
Yep. Manu's been in touch with us along with other members of the community, and we've taken on board some of their ideas to proactively manage the numbers and try and reduce the problem.
Thank you. Use your speaker, please.
This is the appropriate time. I'll wait for the next community meeting because I got hammered on Facebook the other night for cattle stock that did not belong to me by the set name person. And that set name person was the one who caused the problems in the first place in terms of the meeting, but I'm not going to go there. This is not the appropriate place. We'll take it back to the community where Ki Konoi, and he can answer the questions himself.
Thank you. And one other item that we need to just follow up is the item on the top of page 12, and that was with respect to the residents that came around engine braking. It's item 13.1, and we were going to have, it has got a wee bit down here at the bottom about Whakakotahi's looking at it in the speed review, but it was with respect to no engine braking in that area out of Markraka where it's quite bad at the moment. Does anyone want to respond to that, please? No?
Through the chair, the engine braking is sitting, as I understand it, with the speed, the heavy bypass route. Dave, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's something that will come back through as we do the bylaw, as it comes back through this committee and through to council. It'll be something we'll be looking to see what we can enforce through that process as part of the bylaw.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Then we move to the first item on the agenda, page 14, and it's the Regional Land Transport Plans for 2021 for final approval. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Ms. McIntosh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you all. We're coming to the end of this process of the Regional Land Transport Plan development, and hopefully we'll start moving ahead to getting things done. That'll be exciting. So what you have in front of you is still a draft following the hearings process, our consultation and hearings process. And thank you all for coming at short notice to hearing those submissions. We do still have a chance to discuss and deliberate on some of the things that came out there if you would wish to. The report goes through and outlines some of the key themes that came through our consultation process for the Regional Land Transport Plan and the Regional Public Transport Plan. So after you are able to make changes at this time before it gets a final adoption by council on the 30th of June.
Thank you. So to the Regional Land Transport Committee who have had the documentation and been a part of the process, is there anything in the program, in the papers as it is at the moment that you would like to refer to? I'm getting frowns from. Thank you, Councillor Burdett. Councillor Tupera. I'm
Kia ora.
sorry, Councillor, you're not a councillor. Mr. Tupera.
Yeah, that's my
thank
brother
you.
Nick, hopefully one day. I want to congratulate the staff for the work that they've done on both plans. Those who were responsible for drafting, formatting, designing, because I had the opportunity and the privilege to work with some of the staff members in the compilation of particularly the Regional Land Transport Plan. It reflects the bicultural perspective of our community. And often, as we all know, documents that are prepared particularly by central government, not so much local, but definitely central government, whilst there's use of Māori words and descriptions in there, it's really about the detail and the implementation of the detail. And from the work that has been done and from what I've seen in the draft that's now in front of us, I'm very happy with what you've been able to achieve as staff, so congratulations. I particularly point to page 13 where you make reference to the Treaty of Waitangi and the way in which you describe that and its relevance to what the plan is really all about, so well done to that. I don't have any other comments other than in terms of the public transport plan, a couple of tweaks, but those aren't biggies. So I leave it at that. Taking off my treaty hat now and putting on my environmental representation hat, there's a strong component right through the land transport plan. And what's really awesome is that you took cognizance to the submissions that were made, because there's also a strong environmental theme coming through the submissions. So there's a nice balance of people had their say. You'd already in the initial draft made provision for that anyway quite effectively, but there were enhancements made to that following the submission process, so all credit to you for that. So in terms of a treaty hapu iwi partnership and environmental perspective, congratulations. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Do any members of council who are not members of the Regional Land Transport Committee wish to make any comment about any aspects of it? And you may in the next little while it's still up for discussion. I just have a couple of points. One's right. I think the numbers, dare I say, in the printed copy are different to the ones in the. So it's 54 and in our printed, and it talks about transport priority 3 access challenges. But it says ongoing challenges of access and competing modes of transport make it difficult to provide sustainable and inclusive transport options. Well, seriously, we do not have competing modes of transport in this region. It is roads, roads and roads. So I just think it's deemed as a problem and pulled up, and improved access for communities with a choice of transport modes. Well, that is not going to happen. You know, long term, and for city dwellers, there may be some options, but there are very few options. So I wonder whether we need to be a bit more explicit and relative in that paragraph. I'm happy to leave it with council officers, but it just seemed to me that that is an issue that is not going to be addressed in the next 10 years. With respect to the closure of some roads, which I get entirely, and it appears as item 14 on the bottom of page 17, for the benefit of our community, I think unless we wish to alarm people by leaving it as it is, and it seems quite broad, I think we need to be more clear, and it might be somewhere in the document, but having read it previously, I now can't find it. However, it should be noted that in order to maintain the levels of service within budget, some roads may need to be closed over winter periods. And if that means short-term closures for heavy traffic, I do think we should say it, because otherwise it sounds much broader than it's actually going to be in practice. So would council officers like to comment on that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. So it is predominantly for forestry roads that we're talking about. So when we say forestry roads, they are our roads, they're public roads. However, some of those roads only service large forests or multiple forests, which don't have people living up them, is what we're talking about. So this is Tarewa Road's probably the best example of that, the very top end of it, past the last house through there. I think most of you are aware we've been in active negotiations with the forestry companies about how we maintain that road during winter, because we can't keep up with the damage that happens on that road during winter. So it's around either collaborative management, or it's about closure of those roads to all traffic to make sure that they're safe, because there is a reality that some of those roads, when we close them, we can't open them for a while because they've been so badly damaged, or the cost of trying to do that work during winter.
So maybe collaborative management might be included, because that makes a lot of sense, and it just does. Otherwise, I think it sounds too blanket for what we actually really mean.
Are we seriously going to consider closing some of those roads?
Through you, Chair, yes, it is part of the considerations for us, is where we're going backwards on roads during winter. We would give forestry companies adequate notice to make sure that they know not to go in there with their crews over winter, and they have all been open and receptive to that when we've been to the Eastland Wood Council around, as long as we give sufficient notice of the roads we will and won't maintain and the roads that will be closed over winter, they've all said they can work with us on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's exactly the point, isn't it? So people know and understand, and don't think from potentially the script that we mean a more blanket process. If there are no, oh, sorry, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that. When we're looking at the activity classes and the priorities around cycles and walkways, we see 21, 20, 68. So when we're looking at the tables on 68, there's significant work to be done over 6 or 7 different projects, and it's all slotted for this next upcoming, well, a significant fund is slotted for this upcoming financial year. Does that reflect our decision with the long-term plan? Because when we look at the funding sources, it's you know, the ones that have got GDC next to them. I don't know if this, you know, we put in significant funding from GDC. So
Through the chair, yes, this has been updated since the LTP deliberations. So it has included those decisions that came from council through that meeting.
So it looks like a very good year for cycling and walkway.
Can I just caveat that slightly? We these figures are still, as it says in the covering report, they're still subject to Waka Kotahi approval. So we have had indicative approval of some of the continuous programs. So they have been released, but the improvement program, so the capital works program, has not been approved yet from Waka Kotahi, and moderation is set for the end of this month. So yeah, we've still got a while to wait until we know that we can get that subsidy funding for those projects.
Councillor Akahata Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things through the report. First one is in respect to the cycleway walkway framework that's on Wainui heading into the Crawford Road space. We had a couple of residents. So my question is, do we feel confident that we've done enough in the consultation process to the impacts? Residents are concerned about the impact on their house prices, being that they can't park roadside, respect to a cycleway, etc. So I'm just asking on behalf of our ratepayers, have we considered or consulted well enough to tend to concerns about the use of that space for the cycleway walkway? As much as I appreciate it's around safety off Wainui Road, and of course into Harris Street space, which is hugely an issue. So that's my first ask is, are we confident that the consultation to resident ratepayers in Crawford Road has covered off all their concerns?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to discuss the Crawford Road conversation in this. Outside of this, we're discussing the RLTP at this stage. So where it comes to consultation with the residents, we've undertaken consultation on the cycleway. Happy to talk about a specific project outside of this paper.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Wilson. I guess covering off the whole topic of talking to the public and getting them on board, I guess, is a whole framework of what council works tirelessly to do, but that was just in light of a couple of phone calls. The second one is on page 17, points at the top of the page, the impact of forestry trucks on roads, suggestions for heavy vehicle restrictions and requests for a strategic study on integrating heavy vehicles. And are we in a space where we are considering integrating heavy vehicles? Are we looking into that right now? Because the use of the rail corridor is noted in this bullet point. And I know that there are many people who see the use of that being helpful in respect to forestry or heavy trucks on our roading network.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's around discussing future options going forward for how we manage the volume of trucks on and around our network. It's not necessarily saying that it's the Napier to Gisborne rail link. It could be from the Wharirata forest into town and into the log yards at Dunstan Road, for example. So there's different uses of that rail corridor. It's not necessarily the Gisborne to Napier rail corridor, but it's talking about how we integrate some of those things. And we have had some forest owners raise the, well, could we use this? So there's other options just than that part of for the rail corridor.
Yes, I appreciate that, and that's what I was thinking about it, at least it being used if it can be, if it's going to help with integrating heavy vehicles. So thank you for that. And my last one was just in respect to public transport, because we've got this strong push in climate change mitigation. Our plan, I see, we've looked at it, reviewed it, etc. So I'd just be really supportive of how we could do more in our region to support public transport, that network being broader than just city, because we have got others out just in the fringes as such that would perhaps use a bus to get to work, or mitigate or feel like they're being ethical in their space and approach to carbon, so to speak. So is that what we could look at? I heard, sorry, I've forgotten your name. Sally, talk that we can still add to in respect to submissions, respect to that. So public transport, could we do better or more? Is that the intent?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's part of the funding that's in the RLTP for the review, the strategic review of the public transport system. So it's something that we have to do. So that will be looking right through from where are we servicing, what do we want to do going forward, how are we servicing our community from the fleet right through to where it's serviced, which areas it's going to, frequency, all of those things as part of that public transport review, right down to are we using the right buses, are they easy to get on and off for all of our community, not just some of our community. So that's part of that strategic review of the public transport plan.
Lastly, I support our mayor in regards to painting the bridge. Happy to get out there with the paintbrush. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Faulkner, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Burdett. Councillor Faulkner, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually for the Waka Kotahi team, sorry, excuse me. And it's around our interregional connections and resilience thereof. Looking at the costings going through, we are only focusing, it seems, on the connection northwest through the Waiweka Gorge. I don't see any discussion on State Highway 2 going south, and we are at times equally vulnerable in that direction. Just looking at your funding channels there as well, it's just interesting to know you're obviously not looking at connection business cases or resilience business cases until 23, 24, from what I read here. Just interested to know two things there. One, the plan around State Highway 2 South, and two, do we need to wait until 2024 to discuss our resilience going north?
Good question, thank you. Ms. Spade?
And these plans are developed taking into account the overall amount of funding available to us in terms of the state highway network. And as with every part of the National Land Transport Fund, we are under funding constraints, so we have planned those things in a way that we can manage. We are continually looking at what can be done both north and south. So we have the work underway on Waiweka Gorge, which is obviously quite a significant piece of work in terms of our long-term management of that, that part of the corridor. And we also have an ongoing program of work going south. So all the way down to Napier, we've currently got the work on Rapanga Bluffs. We've been doing the planning work for options for the Waikari Gorge. So there is a significant program of ongoing work and work that we can do in our low cost, low risk category as well, which is not at that same level. And on top of that, we have safety and safety boost programs, which, because they're part of a national program, they don't get highlighted in these plans as part of the regional activities, but there will be additional work scheduled through those. Ollie, is there anything else that you'd add on either north or south corridors?
Probably the only thing to add is, like Emma said, the low cost, low risk. A lot of the resilience fixes that we can do are small ones off the side of the road. You know, some of the big ones, the devil's elbow, are far more challenging, as you can imagine. But we're always looking to improve resilience of the network. And going north from here, there's a lot of work in resilience up the coast as well. So we obviously safety and resilience probably our primary focuses for the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
So supplementary to that, I guess, is there potential to work alongside our Hawke's Bay counterparts with regard to funding, because our vulnerability is on the devil's elbow, never mind low cost or maintenance, operations and renewals, which are currently already budgeted on a separate line. How do we best work alongside our neighbours to get bang for buck for the businesses in this region?
Absolutely, there's interregional partnerships around key corridors are an important part of identifying and prioritising activities in the region. You know, we like to be as honest and transparent as we can about what's actually possible. So from the point where we look at what we call a point of entry, which is to start the process of thinking about doing some work in a particular corridor, because every piece of work we do costs money, so we have to authorise every piece of work. So we go from doing a point of entry, and then you go into business case processes. So, for example, in this region where we did the integrated transport priority plan, that gave us a whole lot of strategic priorities for the whole sector, and that alongside that we did the Connecting Tairāwhiti plan, which looked at the north and south connections both through 2 and 35. So we already have done quite a bit of the strategic work there. In terms of the ability to get funding for what would be a very significant piece of work for doing something around Devil's Elbow, we're unlikely to have the capacity to do that in the State Highway Activity class in the next 3 years. So that's where we do have to be careful about the extent to which we enter into planning, because if we do that too far ahead, by the time you actually were in a position that you could fund it, you might have to then do a whole lot of rework because the solutions may change in the meantime, or some key factors may change. So yes, we can continue to look across both regions in terms of whether there's additional work that could be planned for and brought into the next RLTP, for example, but also we'll continue to be as transparent as we can about the capacity to fund large-scale changes on that corridor.
Councillor Burdett.
Thank you. Given Emma's comment about funding constraints, I don't know how relevant this is, but page 18, items 19 and 21, the far rate, David, how are we getting on with waka kotahi in securing more? And subsequent to that, where do we go to get the 24 to 40,000 a year if we're unsuccessful with waka kotahi?
So through you, Madam Chair, we have had our funding assistance rates set for this regional land transport plan. So they were set late last year as what we knew the budgets that we were going in for this 3-year program. They were set by the Waka Kotahi Board. So our budgets have been set for that for now. The road safety program, we're looking to see how we will fund the shortfall as part of that, and have to wait and see how we're able to either change the way that we deliver the program, or look at how we can get external funding to help us with that road safety.
Thank you.
It is political, but it makes me think that that road safety budget has been reduced. And I know Ms. Spate, it might be unfair to ask, but you know, you've got a strong program to reduce injury and deaths to zero. And yet at the same time, Waka Kotahi is cutting funding to some road safety projects. Are you able to comment on that?
The situation has arisen because there was a different rate applied to that particular activity that's actually no longer possible to apply. That is simply a situation that we've had to work through and resolve, so it's treated in a consistent way. In terms of Road to Zero, there absolutely is a significant body of work that we are looking at doing, and we're having some preliminary conversations about how we can work in this region specifically on that, but that's a separate process, and we're at very early stages on that. So I would envisage that we will actually be doing quite a lot in this region, because we have totally recognised that the trauma that we see on the transport system in Tairāwhiti is unacceptable. The view that Road to Zero sets for us is that zero is the only acceptable number, and that we must fundamentally shift what we do to reduce deaths and serious injuries on the land transport system. So, you know, as we've got in this plan, which is fantastic, the target is a 40% reduction in the next 10 years. And that will require not just business as usual, but a change in what we do and how we do it. So I think there is a genuinely really good opportunity for us to work here, to work with this community, to work with mana whenua and our colleagues, New Zealand Police as well, and have an integrated and aligned approach. And we know that the commitment of this council to road safety is strong. You see firsthand, and your people are first responders to those accidents. So we know that we've got great commitment and support from you. So we will continue to work with you, and I think you'll actually see a lot of resources in terms of how we want to partner and tell the stories in a way that's appropriate for this region.
So is there any last question with respect to the Regional Land Transport Plan? If not, the recommendation just needs a slight amendment to be correct with respect to our council processes. It doesn't change the tenor, but it should read that the Regional Transport Committee recommends that council adopt, and that number 1 becomes A and number 2 becomes B. So 1 is the recommend and A and B are the 2 adoptions. And I had a movement from Councillor Burdett to move. Is there a seconder from the voting members of the Regional and Transport Committee? Thank you, Councillor Cranston. I'll put that. All those in favour that the Regional Transport Committee recommends this Regional and Transport Plan to Council. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. We move to item 21-114. Thank you very much, Ms. Manning. Thank you for the work that's gone into getting it to this stage, and to Joe Noble, who was on the call yesterday, the day before. Thank you. So item 11, which is road safety update at page 125. Thank you.
So for the committee, just while L'Oreal makes her way up here, this is the overview of the activities that we've been have. So these are funded by Waka Kotahi and by council, and these are a number of improvements across the district. So Whakamana here is obviously our recidivist drink driving program. We've got our driver licensing program, which are our big ones. The driver licensing has hit the snag that everybody has within the district at the moment of there not being enough assessors to be able to get people once we get them through. So we have got a bit of a backlog that we're working through at the moment, but it doesn't mean that we're not committed to that project, and we're trying to look at new ways to deliver that this financial year that we've got coming up. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report, and I've got L'Oreal to help me to make sure I don't give the wrong answer.
While others are thinking of their question, whose responsibility is it to find the assessors and employ them?
We contract that out to VTNZ.
And therefore it's ours.
Well, VTNZ, yeah. But we do have a national, it goes through the AA.
Right.
But we do have a national shortage at the moment. It is something we're looking at around the country. And in addition to that, the Ministry of Transport is leading a review of the graduated driver licensing program. So there is some work going on. It's not unique to Gisborne. And I know that a lot of the regional leads and government agencies and police are working across multiple regions to look at opportunities, including how to get people to the tests, how to make the most of the available testing agents, and also to see if we can use, apparently there's a few army testers that have been deployed to COVID that we might try and extract out. So there's a few options that we're looking at that could help, but it is a problem everywhere in the country. I have a learner driver who's trying to get it restricted. It's the same in Wellington. So so we do know that that's a problem. We've just got to keep working on it, and also make sure that we're contributing to that review of the graduated driver licensing program and issues of equity and access that have been raised as part of that.
It is regrettable because it's difficult enough for young people to get a licence where transport to the testing, and once testing all came to Gisborne, that was a challenge in itself. So to not have testers does leave young people in quite a vulnerable situation should they choose to drive without a licence when the environment is not provided for them. So I hope real urgency is given to those options. And somebody must have seen the difficulties coming. So let's hope some work is being done promptly to amend that. Councillor Burdett.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to those that I've listened to, this program has been very successful, and the numbers that have actually achieved getting a license have been quite high. So let's hope it reinvents itself and we can find these assessors.
So just to clarify for the chair, sorry for you, Madam Chair, the Ngā Arapai program we are committed to, and we're working with Tairāwhiti Rep to make sure that we have that in train for next year up the coast and for our rural communities. So that program is progressing. We're trying to carry the funding forward, and we've been working with Waka Kotahi to make sure that we are still delivering that program together as well. So 100% committed to Ngā Arapai. It's around, we decided to hold back for the delay around it, but as Ms. Spates said, this is a national thing that we're working through, but very much still wanting to continue with that program.
That's great, because that has had good outcomes, but we need to support young people into that program so they don't find themselves in a vulnerable situation. Mr. Broderick, do you want to make any comment about it since it falls within
No, only that I would support all the comments that you've made and the debate as well. It's an issue in Hawke's Bay, the same, and we had an issue there where we had not enough eye endorsed as well that actually obstruct us, and so we've increased those, but the backlog is now further down the assembly line. So,
but it does put young people in a vulnerable situation.
and it's a massive opportunity for us in the police to divert people away from the criminal justice system, and to put them into driving licensing programs and then into employment. So we need it for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. With respect to the rest of the program, thank you very much, Councillor Akahara-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one question. It was just regarding bus shelters. Kia ora, Laura. I know that we worked on one for London Street, and just in the page 111, it does talk about cost maintenance with respect to bus shelters. But are we confident that our region has enough bus shelters for our populace with winter coming on? I know that's often a question asked as well. And how is the maintenance looking for those? Because I do know that some of them do take a bit of a hiding respect to hooligans. But yeah, so just have we got enough bus shelters, you feel, for region at the now, and how are they being maintained? Because there's been some good work with art and children, I believe. And so has that made a difference with respect to bus shelters?
I'll answer the boring part of the question, I suppose, because the answer is boring, not the question. Sorry, Councillor. Around the bus shelters, the infrastructure, that's part of that strategic review of the public transport. So we have to have a look at the services. It's from, as I said, the buses, the shelters, the routes, all of those things. That's wrapped up in as part of that. To make sure that we've got enough across the district. We don't have bus shelters at every single bus stop. So in winter, there is the likelihood that most people won't have the ability to have a bus shelter. We have prioritised them to make sure that school children, where they get picked up from, that they have shelters as much as possible. Regarding the artworks and the damage to, I'll pass over to you, L'Oreal.
We are currently working with schools to try get some education around the damage. Especially happens in the mornings, we found with the smashed windows, but they're getting replaced constantly. And I can confirm for Murdoch Road, they'll be getting a new bus shelter next financial year, and the elderly at Beetham Village.
Can I ask, did Beetham Village contribute to their bus shelter? Thank you. Ms. Herbert?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A group of people who are silent in this road safety are the disabled who use mobility scooters in Gisborne, and it is a feature of the city that I have not seen anywhere else in the country. They drive their mobility scooters on the centre of the road like they are cars. I have filmed someone on his mobility scooter going around the roundabout. It's just a matter of time before someone is killed or maimed. It's just a matter of time. But it is not a feature I see in any other city.
I saw that today. It happened today, exactly what you're saying. Can we ask Mr. Roderick to talk about that, please?
It's the first time it's been brought to my attention, so I wasn't conscious of it being an issue in this particular area. But I can, I'll ask my team to have a look at it and see what is it, whether it's an education issue or somebody's out there advising them to use the roads as opposed to the footpaths. But yeah, I'll put that down as an action for me, and I'll take it back to the team.
Can I just join into that? Because it wasn't even like there wasn't a cycleway. This was at lunchtime. I went out, I went a little way up Ormond Road and had to go to Rootney Road. And a gentleman on a bright yellow mobility scooter was happily coming down here round the roundabout, across Rootney Road, not in the cycle lane, which existed at least as far as the roundabout. And I've seen it at other times. So I thank you for bringing that up. Do we do anything about it? No. We'll give it all over to you and your team. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you. Do you have other matters you wish to raise, Ms. Herbert?
Sorry, Madam Chair. Just in terms of total mobility trips, page 106, sorry, Mr. Wilson. I encourage and endorse the need to review the contribution the council makes to the HBA. It hasn't been reviewed for at least a decade, and $6 per trip just doesn't quite cut it for a group of people who are largely beneficiaries.
Welcome, Ms. Worsnop. We did put an apology for lateness. Thank you, Councillor Worsnop. Are there any other questions with respect to the road safety update for the year? No? Do I have someone prepared to move it as a report for noting? Moved, Councillor Burdett. Seconded, Councillor Cranston. That the road safety report, Regional Transport Committee notes the content of this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you very much. And we move to, thank you very much. Thank you. Page 133 and report 21125, and we welcome. Hang on a minute, let's got Sally's name. The Spates report for Waka Kotahi regional update. That's what I expected. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. It's great to be here for my last visit as a member of this Regional Transport Committee. And I just, as part of that, I'll go through all our normal process, but I would like to acknowledge the work of the committee over the last 4 years that I've been involved. We have seen some really great work that has been the council working in partnership with Waka Kotahi that's enabled us to access significant amounts of provincial growth fund investment for the transport system here, as well as all of the other work that's gone on in the network and the recovery from emergency events, and the work that's been done right through the town centre in the recent last couple of years. So it has been just a fantastic opportunity for me to see this community in action and the representatives working so hard for the community and for the industries in this region. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the passion everyone brings to the table. Occasionally we've crossed swords, but it's always been really good natured, and you've always been really welcoming to me as a person visiting your region. And I was saying to the team, I will really miss coming up here and actually seeing what a difference transport connections can make, whether it's getting kids to school safely through those cycleways, whether it's working in partnership with Mana Whenua to improve resilience on 35, and creating the great local gateways like we did at Motu Bridge. And you know, this region is a fantastic region, and I will miss the opportunity to visit. I might occasionally have to come, and part of my new role, I am working with New Zealand Police on road safety and Road to Zero, and so I might get here, but I might just come and visit my cousins, so that might be altogether more relaxing. But so I would like to thank you. I'd also like to introduce Linda, and if Linda could find her microphone nearby, just give Linda the opportunity to introduce herself. She is very well qualified to work in the region and support the region as we go forward. So, Linda.
Kia ora tātou, everyone. Ko Ruahine, te monga, ko Manawatu, te awa, no Papiawea aho, ko Linda Stewart, toko ingoa. Hi, everybody. The accent's a bit of a red herring. I'm a Pami girl. Lived there for 15 years now. Made a bit of a mistake in the middle and went over to Australia, but chose to come back to Pami. It's my pleasure to be able to join you, and just want to say I've got some big boots to fill, I feel, in replacing Emma, but really looking forward to working with you all, and already getting a real feel for the commitment and passion you have to supporting the prosperity of your region. I've spent the past 4.5 years in economic development as the Chief Executive of the Central Economic Development Agency based in the Manawatu. And this new role and the opportunity that I have to work with you really gets to the core of what I'm passionate about. And that's not economic development from a dollars and cents perspective, but what supporting connectivity between our people and our place can provide also in cultural perspective, environmental, and the social and well-being that it brings to the community. So looking forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We have buried her in alphabet soup of the transport sector, so I'm trying not to use acronyms anymore. Anyway, moving into the presentation itself, is with any luck. Oh, fatal operating error. Turn on the first switch. Okay, so I think this is probably a deceptively innocuous slide, but the National Land Transport Program is, we're in a situation where we have the largest ever investment in the land transport system, but alongside that we have people with right across the country. Each community has very high aspirations of what they want to achieve, and so the bids that we're receiving are significantly higher right across the board, so between 20 and 90% increases in those bids. And so we've had to really focus what we can fund on maintaining our levels of service and completing existing commitments. And so we've been through the continuous programs, and then the board will move into looking at the improvements programs as they finalise the National Land Transport Plan. Other key activities that you've been involved with is obviously the setting of speed limits, and this is a change to the rule which sits under the legislation about how we go about setting speed limits. Gisborne, the Tairāwhiti region, has been an early starter in this in terms of the work that you've already commissioned, and you're already well down the pathway of looking at your whole region. And as a unitary, that's obviously been an opportunity you've had and have been taking. The new rule will make mandatory the process of looking regionally at speed limits, and the implementation timeframe once the consultation period's over and the rule is implemented will be that the new plans will need to be in place by 2024, but councils who are ahead of the game like you can actually have those interim plans in place and be starting to work to them. And what it means then is that you won't need to go through a bylaw process for every change in speed, but you just do that once you've done your overarching plan. Those things can be rolled out in 3-year blocks. So the first 3 year has a dedicated plan with the funding to implement those changes, and then the following 3 years has the principles by which you'll operate. So while it has an upfront process of analysis and consultation, then the rollout is a much more straightforward activity. As part of that, one of the really critical things is the dropping of speed limits around all schools. So in urban schools, that will be 30 kilometres an hour with 40 kilometres allowed in some circumstances, and rural schools will be 60 kilometres an hour. And 40% of those changes need to be made in the first 3 years. So, so these are changes in how things are done, but also increases the transparency and visibility of speed limits. So there'll be a national register that will record all of the speed limits so everyone knows where they are. And we'll also, we have a new statutory function in the Transport Agency where Kane Patina is the new Director of Land Transport, and he will take an overarching role for the whole country to look at, are we building a really consistent speed limit environment where all similar roads that have a similar form and function have similar speed limits, and that it's very easy for drivers to what we call self-explaining roads. So drivers naturally drive it at the appropriate speed because they all look and feel consistent around the country. But that also takes into account there will be variations because of volumes and particular characteristics in some communities. So it is a big change. For a unitary council, it's probably not so big because you don't have the different roles for the RTCs that have got 7 or 8 councils within them have quite a different role, but very important to be having your say and contributing to the consultation on that rule change, and that closes on the 25th of June.
I know our consultation stopped, I think, the 29th, maybe last week. So there are some proposals made, and I don't know how many people we've heard back from in our community. Will the consultation be taken into account, and might there be changes to what was proposed?
So there's probably 2 things. The process you're going through now is being done under the current rule. So if you complete that within the timeframe before the new rule comes into effect, then you would just complete that process and implement it as per the current rule. If you then wish to hold it over into the new rule, you could also do that. So there's a choice sitting in there. But everything you're doing, from what I can see, is very consistent with the new rule. It's really anticipated, you've looked at it, and so it is very much in alignment. So you won't have to do it again.
So I think you misunderstood my question. What and it's my ignorance because I don't know about Rule 1 and Rule 2, so please humor me. What I'm asking is that we went out to our community with certain speed proposals. Now that we have received the feedback, will that be taken into account, and there might be possible changes to what is being proposed? So what we're proposing now is a 30-kilometre around schools. Say 2,000 people in our community came back and said, well, we don't like that. I'm just making it up. Is there the opportunity then to adjust that, or what we consulted on, will that go through?
So that sits with you as a road controlling authority now. So as with any consultation, and there's some rules and interpretations around what consultation is, you have to be genuine, you have to allow time, you have to give due consideration to all the feedback you receive, and then you make a judgment on what your final decision is. So we've had situations on a state highway in Wellington where we proposed lowering the speed limit to 80 k's. We went through consultation. There was a very strong social media campaign against it. We got hundreds of submissions opposed to it, many from people who lived a very, very long way away, like not in New Zealand. And so we looked at the feedback we received. We looked at where there were people who were raising concerns because they use that road and it may have affected their journeys, or they wanted to raise stuff that we may not have been aware of. And we decided to go through and drop that speed limit because we didn't feel that the consultation had raised any issues that were material to changing the basis on which we'd made that decision. So the same thing applies here. The council currently as road controlling authority, and in the future under the new rule, would still make that call. It would then come to the RTC as well, and then it would go through the implementation.
I think that was Mayor's question, and a short answer was, can we proceed with the work that we've done And will it come to the RTC and be adopted prior to your 2024 process?
Well, it depends how quick if you complete it before the rule comes in, you just do it as per the current process. Yeah, and then, but if you don't, you would just continue your process because I'm pretty confident it will be fully in alignment with the new rule.
So through you, Madam Chair, we are in alignment with the proposal from Waka Kotahi and it's exactly what we've just consulted on. We've had about 412, I think, is the number of submissions that we've had on the speed. Most, and this feedback is unsurprising. People support going slow around schools, whether it be urban or rural. There's some things raised about the 80k zone that was proposed for the open road speed, which I'm sure is similar to what Waka Kotahi has experienced as well. So we're working through that to bring it back, but we're on the same kaupapa here. We agree with each other around the proposals that are set. It'll depend on the community feedback and the recommendations that we will bring to you around the timeframes, as Ms. Spate said, about whether or not we drop some of those open road speeds and those things. That's your decision to make. So we'll bring those recommendations up based on the feedback that we've got from the community. Through the chair, yes, it will be before 2024. We have to have these things in place by 2024 under the new rule, the new speed limits outside of the schools.
Thank you. Councillor Worsnop.
Sorry, yeah, I just had a question. So under the change, the proposed that getting feedback on, the rules that are, or the plan that is put in place by the committee, the speed management committee, then needs to be signed off by the Director of Land Transport. So we would not, if what the region asks for is not consistent necessarily with what the Director of Land Transport thinks is appropriate, we potentially wouldn't control what happens in this region because it would not get certification. Am I right in that interpretation?
Yes, so the Director of Land Transport has that regulatory role. Now, we wouldn't be wanting to leave it to that point to get to before we actually resolve those issues. So if there was a situation where a region was proposing to do something that was quite outside the bounds of what the general guidance is, then we'd be working through that in advance.
Supplementary that, for example, dropping the open road speed limits to 80 kilometres an hour.
That could be an example, and this is, I know there's a much broader conversation as part of Road to Zero that we need to be having right across the country, and it's not unique to this community, about what the evidence tells us about safety and the role of road design, the role of infrastructure improvements, the role of safe vehicles, the role of speed and enforcement. So there's a whole range of things that we do to improve safety. Speed is one of those, but we need to be thinking about it in that wider context of what are the best mix of things we do to improve safety. And so there's a much bigger conversation I think we need to be having around some of that as well.
Thank you very much. We're back to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Road to Zero. So again, I think I've mentioned this in the last presentation that we are progressively creating some video resources. These are for people already working in the system currently. So it's an opportunity for people who are wanting to get familiar with Road to Zero and why it might be of interest to you, or how people are starting to talk about it and think about it. And so we're encouraging anyone who's working in the system to be starting to look at this, to look at the Road to Zero strategy and be thinking about the role that you can play in supporting that approach. As I mentioned earlier, then later this year we'll be starting to engage the wider New Zealand public in that conversation and starting to look at how we really start to challenge ourselves about fundamentally shifting deaths and trauma on our road network. Along the way, we've got this icon that we will be starting to use on materials that support Road to Zero, and we are making that available to anyone who's working in a consistent way. So you can just pop onto our website and highlight when you're working in alignment with the strategy. Alongside that, as we develop new interventions or apply more and more of our safety interventions, we're gathering evidence around their effectiveness and situations in which you use them and the outcomes you can get from them. So it includes intersection speed zones, raised safety platforms, rural roundabouts, and just highlight when these are effective, why we use them, and because some of those are very useful in certain situations, but not so useful in others. So it helps everyone to understand the basis for using them. So again, if you're interested in infrastructure improvements to improve safety, these are good things to look at, and we just want to make that information generally available. Alongside, one of our other important planks is obviously vehicle safety, and I've talked a bit about this over the last year, that we really encourage everyone to be using the Right Car website to buy the safest vehicle in their price range. And the website's been updated, so it looks at driver safety, so how does it protect someone in the vehicle, and what are the tools that help to prevent crashes and so on. And then overall safety, which is how are people in other vehicles impacted by this particular vehicle, how pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists impacted. So that's really important, but we're also now looking at fuel efficiency and low carbon emissions. So all of that information is available so that those key government priorities are able, that many people actually share, are able to be identified in people's purchasing decisions. One of the other tools that I know your officers are working and using as part of their planning is the One Network framework. And this is really a tool to ensure that we're thinking in a consistent way right around the country, whether in a rural environment or an urban environment, about the function of the different parts of the transport system. So if we've got roads, for example, in your urban area that you want to see lots of shoppers and pedestrians and people moving around, you're not going to have a 4-lane stretch through there at high speed. So it's really about saying for particular types of streets, you're able to map those and have a consistent framework to understand what their purpose is, and therefore adjust how you plan around those. So that's just another tool for everyone to be working in a consistent way, as is the asset management data standard. And this is going to be implemented in July next year. And so our technical people will be coming out to work with your officers on ensuring that everyone understands what it involves. And it will mean that right across our system, we're all using a consistent basis for every culvert, bridge and other structure, and so that we're really doing that long-term management of our major asset. Moving into Tairāwhiti and updates on our activities. You will have obviously been very aware of the work on the Tahanui Bridge as we widen that, and lots of activities just to bring both the widening and then the concrete pouring all together, and also to keep doing the work with the marae in terms of making sure we get those entranceways both safe and then secure and planted and so on. So that's great to see that last narrow bridge there made safer. As you know, on the interactive website, you can go on and see all those activities. So when we look at both State Highway 2 North and South and State Highway 35, you can see the passing opportunities, the resilience sites, and the other activities such as the Ropanga retreat, where we're retreating back from the river. See where they're at, and also see when you click on those individual circles if they're in active use, what the likely travel delays are.
Just in regards to, through you, Madam Chair, the Waiweka Gorge, how far does the Tairawhiti jurisdictional responsibility go to? Does it go halfway through the gorge all the way to Opotiki?
That's a very good question, because the boundary is actually on this side of the gorge, but we actually manage it out of this side. So because of its importance to this region, we recognise that by actually bringing it into this region, although its footprint's actually over the border.
Yeah. Thank you.
But we can attack it from both ends where we need to.
And the reason why I highlight it, when I was a kid, there was a halfway sign. And we go through the gorge and we'd look forward to seeing the sign. Consideration needs to be given to re-establishing that. And I'm sure my brother Nick could come up with something to put. Anyway.
So just
on the record, right?
some more detail on our Provincial Growth Fund activities. So we have a lot of work in terms of all those passing opportunities. So we're looking to have the first 8 sites completed by December, and then more sites will need to be done after that. And I think that's a really good opportunity. You know, the vast majority of your truck drivers are really considerate and actively use those to allow other vehicles to get past. Along the way, I know around the country, we get a level of concern from people that perhaps some drivers aren't using slow vehicle lanes as actively as they perhaps should be. And we are looking around the country, we have various different signs to help encourage that courteous driving. And so there's things like vehicle behind you, please pull over, let them pass, those sorts of signs. So, so those are, we may look at doing some more sort of social media and promotion of that use of those slow vehicle bays where we see that might be causing some concerns. The resilience work, we're about to get into construction there, and there's multiple sites that we're looking at and identifying what the opportunities are for those. Waikari Gorge, we've largely completed all of the work that's needed to reach a preferred option and take it to the board. As you know, we've got funding for that design phase, and funding for construction is something that we'll have to look for through the next period. But having the design, having done all that option work, will position us really well for that one. And finally, the Napier to Opotiki HPMV route. Again, we've completed 2 of the bridges through the gorge, and we'll progressively do the rest as we get time through summer, because we can't work on those projects in winter.
Through you, Madam Chair, just in terms of, and I know it's in your report further on as well, engagement with iwi. So can I assume that for the purposes of our people being able to participate proactively, they're being resourced or supported? I'm not suggesting that they're entitled to a fee, but I'm assuming that in the budgets that you have in terms of consultation with the community, you're making provision to make it easier for them to come to the table to talk to your people. Is that happening?
Yeah, so the team's actively engaging in the areas we're working in, and part of our social procurement, we also look at where we can have employment opportunities and local employment opportunities as well.
Thank you. Before you go off that page, on each part, Mr. Chief, did you get further questions?
Sorry, Madam Chair, it's more to ensure that where our people are asked to participate, whether it be a consultation or part of an iwi group, referencing the Waikari Gorge and the Cultural Walk, to ensure that they're able, that they are being resourced to able to proactively come to the table to participate in those discussions. And I'm suggesting, if that's not the case, both at a national and local level, that needs to be affected. And that's a matter, could be case by case, you're talking to the people who are going to participate or actively contribute as to what their needs might be.
Yeah, so So we do have a series of principles when we enter into any project, and so we look to make contact with mana whenua who have indication interest, and sometimes that's iwi, sometimes it's hapu. Sometimes there's debate over who should be there at the table. We don't adjudicate those debates, we facilitate anyone to participate. And as part of those initial discussions, we work out what is the most appropriate way to engage and support people to participate.
The Waikari, for your benefit, the Waikari Gorge is not something that GDC would be involved in. It would be Whakatahi and Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Can we just open it to the floor though, for any questions with respect to that that page that Sarah asked him? She's there. I've got a couple of questions, but councillors may have a question first. Is that the mayor? Do you have a question?
No, I'm just scratching my head.
You've got your speaker on, I think. Oops. Did you have something, Councillor Burdett? Councillor Akahara Brown?
I guess our region is hopeful we don't have another 1 in 100 rainstorm flood that impacted our region a couple of years ago, but we're seeing it impact obviously Canterbury at this time. Are we feeling confident our bridges resilience in this space? Because I've seen and heard some of the significant washouts of bridges down in the Canterbury. But yeah, with resilience work, I see the Wigan Bridge is going to have work done on it. But are we confident our bridges currently in regards to winter on its way and perhaps hopeful, not the same weather amount of water loss that Canterbury's had?
Well, I think the good thing about the emergency events we've had mean that your bridges are actually being very well investigated and inspected. So we do look at them. What we find, and indeed what we found in the Canterbury event, is that the bridge structures themselves stand up very well in most cases. So we do have really good footings for those, and the designs are resilient. Notwithstanding that the Ashburton Bridge had some underscouring, but the bridge itself was still robust, and that will just need to be repinned from underneath. In terms of the other bridges and the local road bridges, as far as my understanding in that event, the main event is the washout of the approaches, and we've had problems like that in this region, but that's not about the engineering of the structure, and those approaches can then be strengthened and put back in place, and it's a relatively quick, in most cases, that those can be filled in. But yeah, there's plenty of work done, and things like the asset management standard work is actually about ensuring that every region is doing that in a consistent way. But I know after the last couple of winters, there was a lot of work done, particularly when we had a lot of slash loading on those bridges, and they performed pretty well.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the passing opportunities and the 8 sites to be completed by December 21. Are we going to meet that target? Sorry.
Are we on track to meet all the passing sites?
8 sites to be completed by 2021. And I'm sorry, but I just wondered where the 2 additional sites were that were to commence in February 21. Page, oh, it's not numbered. It's this page here, the top box, Mr. Postings. I'm just trying to get a handle on what exactly of that work that's identified to be completed is completed or underway, because December 21 will be here in no time.
So they're currently working through sites at the moment. So that is correct.
Can we ask that NZTA Whakatahi next time come with a real update on what's going on in our own area? I mean, it's really helpful to councillors, but it's also helpful to the regional and transport community reps to truly understand exactly what's going on and where. And so it says 2 were to commence in February. It would be really helpful if we knew which 2 they were. Some of us who travel the road see what's going on, and it's a little hard to tell whether some repairs and maintenance being made to what is currently a passing opportunity, whether that's counted as a new one or just your repairs and maintenance. So can I ask that we have more detailed information around the sites that actually relate to Tairāwhiti and our wider region?
Yes,
Or the next
certainly.
meeting,
I think we can just do a specific report. We can highlight, is that specifically on the passing opportunity sites?
And any specific piece of work that's happening for Tauranga. We get the general thrust, but we're interested in the details as well. So moving on to the Wigan Gorge.
Wigan Gorge this time. We've had it's just the single stage business case that we have
Not
underway.
spelled correctly in the heading.
Pardon?
It's not spelled correctly in the
Oh.
heading. Please, a plea to your successor. Can we please see that we spell our place names correctly?
The long list of options has been identified as a result of the stakeholder workshops, and so now that means the team can work through those options and come back with one integrated package that we will look to then get through an approval process and then seek funding for. The Makakumuka Bridge replacement, again, that we're very near completing the design work and the consultation there, and we have pre-implementation funding confirmed. So as we get through each of those steps, we can then hopefully look to remove both of those single lane bridge and have a replacement that will be a bit safer for everyone. And on the state highway network, we've completed our current season renewals, which is good because we're now into winter. And the team's now planning where they're going to focus for the next construction season. And also just an update there on the work we did through the COVID-19 response package in terms of taking displaced workers, upskilling them and working in the transport sector. And then now we have those 8 workers deployed with our contractors and working on the activities that we've had across the season. Next one, speed and safety. We're just in the final stages to get approval of the State Highway 35 to Puya Springs Township section that we went back and reconsulted with the community following that feedback. The State Highway 35 and State Highway 2 speed reviews, we've completed quite a bit of work in terms of technical assessment, but we've also taken a step back to allow some more time to think about how we work with iwi and how we work with residents, because it's the full journeys that people are taking along the whole length of those routes that we want to be thinking about as we go. And we've had some really great feedback that that's really important to the community. So we just thought rather than proceeding in a standard way, we'd actually really think about how we can best engage. And we may also link that up with our Road to Zero discussion that we want to have in the region, so that we're talking to people about all of the factors as well as talking about the role that speed can play. Emergency works, obviously we still have some 3 key sites that we're still working through, and in the case of the Monga Tuna dropout north of Tolaga Bay, that's been completed, but we have two other sites that will be getting underway later this year. We'll keep working on those and keep you updated as they proceed. And finally, on the wandering stock, we have been doing quite a bit of work in this space to talk to the communities along the road, and there's a further discussion at Hicks Bay scheduled, is that next week, to work with the local community on that as well. and just explore the options to really try to ensure that we prevent it from happening, because responding to it's one part of the picture, but actually preventing it from happening is the long-term solution that we really want to see.
Thank you, Mr. Tupera.
Kia ora, through you, Madam Chair. Just in terms of the emergency works, is it the practice or policy, is it fix the problem, or is there an overarching approach to the problem in terms of considering redirecting the road given the instability that has caused the problem? Is that part of the thinking of your people?
So generally speaking, we'll do an immediate assessment, and the team will look at how can they reinstate access as a priority. Then when we look to repairs, we need to look at what is the most appropriate repair. Some of these, there's a range of different factors that contribute to slips and washouts. Some of them, so we have some parts of the network where we have mass land movement happening. And on those ones, obviously it's very tricky because over time, hillsides move and keep moving. Other times we have rivers that move and redirect themselves. You've got a few of those in this region. And then we have ones where new springs turn up and change the underlying nature of things. And so each of those situations is considered on a case-by-case basis. And some sites here and in other places around the network we actively manage, and other places we can put in a repair that we can have confidence will be resilient for a very long time. In terms of rerouting or retreating a road, those are very major activities. So in the case of State Highway 2 South, we're doing a retreat, and that's to improve the resilience because the river keeps doing what rivers do. But a large-scale realignment of a road is a very big investment. And so we start getting up very quickly into tens to hundreds of millions. So they are considered from time to time, but we do have to very carefully justify that in terms of how that fits right across the country in terms of priorities and volumes of traffic and alternative routes. So generally, if we can get a reasonable return out of a repair and things such as retaining walls and so on, then that will be a preferred option.
Thank you.
Unless I've made an error.
Faulkner? Oh, sorry, were you asking your colleagues?
Yeah, just making sure I wasn't making things up.
Thank you. Moving right along, Councillor Faulkner would like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the update. And excuse my my naivety, because it's the first chance I've had a chance to go through all of this from a national provider point of view. At a high level, and listening to you talk along the lines of interregional spend effectively, are you looking to spend the same or slightly more in our region going forward, given that nothing's getting cheaper? Is our budget the same or preferably better over the next little while?
So generally speaking, in terms of continuous programs, all councils have received an increase, although not to the level that they were seeking, because we simply don't have the capacity within the fund to increase everyone across the board. But we know everyone is facing significant cost increases, and that's the case across the board. And if we can't continue to increase budgets, then in the end, you will end up with a drop in your level of service. But we have worked really hard to ensure that we are still looking to maintain those continuous programs and maintenance and low cost, low risk programs. In terms of capital improvements, so the improvements activities, the board hasn't yet made its decisions on those. And again, we do know that the aspirations communities have compared to the funding available it will be significantly oversubscribed in terms of what we can fund. So whether the amounts that may come to this region, I don't know what they are currently. It will look a lot less than what you've had in the last couple of years, because remember, through that previous work we've done, you were able to secure a very significant Provincial Growth Fund investment in your roading network. And that's absolutely fantastic, but that level of investment is not something that can be maintained through the National Land Transport Fund. And obviously the maintenance of that will be contributed to by the fund, but that level of improvement investment will not be able to be sustained, because that was a one-off Crown investment.
So are we saying we're going to have less in region?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
But it's a different funding source.
That's my point. That's what I'm trying to ascertain.
You don't want
Following on from that is just one more question around your wandering stock program, and in the interests of good neighbourliness, wandering weeds and wandering animal pests. Where do we stand on a partnership in that regard? Because there's those of us who live alongside significant lengths of state highway, and wandering plants in particular are a big expense.
Yeah, so obviously we look to maintain our roadsides as much as we can. We do have obviously every time we have people working in a live road environment, we need to ensure that they're safe. So we have to put in place temporary traffic management protocols. So all of our roadside maintenance, we have to schedule quite carefully in terms of getting the best value for money out of that, because we don't want to be wasting money that we could otherwise be putting into improving the safety and maintaining the network. So we have to balance across all of that. And I know I've had feedback from the chair previously that the community members would often like to see more maintenance and so on alongside the roadside and weed management and so on. And we do as much as we can, but it is all comes out of the same activity in terms of the maintaining the network.
Councillor Burdett.
Thank you for that reporting. We are hill underslip north of Hicks Bay. It's over 12 months now, Emma. That's probably the most dangerous slip in the northern area at present. And I just wondered, without being critical, when it's going to be addressed. I understand what you've said about putting all these things in place and geotechnic work, etc. But I'm repeating what I said earlier. It's the most dangerous slip on the coast. As you come from the top end at night, even though the orange stuff's there in sight, for people that don't know the road, they could be in trouble. Coming down to the wandering stock one, I just want to reinforce the good work that was done during Tairāwhiti roads. We fenced with the support of the Transport Agency, from the 3 bridges to the other side of Hicks Bay, where it was needed. No question about the funding for the fencing, no question that it was getting done. The only area that we didn't do was just the other side of the Wigan Bridge. This winter, and only 2 or 3 months ago, there were 3-car pileup and a weaner was killed. Fortunately, a neighbour came along and got those stock off the road. But it's still an urgent issue in terms of safety. I personally have put in 3 requests for services through our people to talk to Helen, see if we can find the funds to do it. And the other issue in terms of the safety measures is, as you go over the Awatere Bridge going north, on the right-hand side is the entrance way to the Awatere River, where all the crushing of metal is done. We had a double-gated fenceway there. there's nothing now. It's all gone, pulled down so the trucks can get access. I would have thought by now someone would have attended to that, because it is an area where the stock come out on the road and where there was a serious fatality a little while ago. So those are some of the issues. As I travelled this morning on the Jerusalem Strait, there were cattle. As I climbed the hill going over Toka, there were stock there. So I just wonder how active the staff are in terms of getting things done.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this a number of times. Every dollar we spend taking our crews off their work to improve the roading network, to respond to the farmers and landowners and stock owners who are not restraining and managing their stock as they're required to do, is a dollar we don't spend on the network. It's crews that we have to then take off shift because they've worked too long and they can't go and work the next day doing their job on the road network. So we really do want this to be a problem that is owned by the people who cause it. It is not, you know, we will do what we can to alert people to the risks and to respond as much as we can, but this is a problem that is the responsibility of the people who own and manage those stock. And to ask us to go and fence every area of highway that has currently got substandard fencing. We've got great farmers in this community who've gone out, who have recognised that some of their fences aren't up to scratch and have done the work to keep their stock safe and the community using those roads safe. That's fantastic and we absolutely applaud it. But it is not the responsibility of the Transport Agency to fence people's private land.
Emma, you people took the contract back off the council, who have been on record saying our staff did a marvellous job. And it was with the support of the agency that we did all that fencing. They gave us the funding, we found the contractors, and we oversaw it. What I'm asking is, does Kotahi serve abatement notices on farmers to ensure that what you've just said happens? Because our people did. They put abatement notices on farmers to make sure that their fences were right.
Where we have identified stock, we're definitely working with those owners. The challenge is sometimes that we don't even get stock that we can identify.
I just want to support Councillor Burdett on that. We've had this conversation many times, and it is the landowners. I totally agree with you. It is the landowner's responsibility. But I've said, if you don't actually put abatement notices on or gather up those stock and impound them and then notify that they will be sold, that will make people take this much more seriously. It's going to be a real issue if someone is killed. And already this winter we've had actual physical accidents. So it is really important. And I endorse what Councillor Burdett just said. The council had stock control people who weren't trying to be roadmen or road construction teams at the same time. And so they could be entirely focused on stock control and not have to be taken off the work that they were doing the rest of the time. I'm not going to go over it again, but I completely support that livestock should be impounded. And I think the excuse we heard last time, the only place you had to impound them was in Wairoa, which seems bizarre. But that's what used to happen years ago. I mean, half of us around this table can remember when there were advertisements in the paper notifying the impounded stock that could be retrieved at the cost of X, Y, Z by Y date, or otherwise they were sold. I mean, we just have to toughen up on this. And I've written, because Ms. Harris said, how about you write something in the paper, in the opinion piece, and I have. This is what landowners should do, and the bulk of landowners do know. But the point Mr. Burdett's raised around the double gated entranceway to which is a metal place, well, possibly that is a public place that maybe does need some attention. And if it requires a couple of cattle stops to be installed, then shouldn't we be looking at that? We've got to really take this seriously before someone does lose their life. And it's not for the want of talking about it time and time again.
Through you, Madam Chair, could I just have a word here?
Thanks.
As the person who's actually leading this in the Gisborne Tairāwhiti area, I just want to reiterate that I get out of bed every day to do the best by my community. I am working with the Gisborne District Council, stock control staff, the enforcement staff. We are working on the ground with everybody. We are working with iwi up the coast. We are working with our partners in other government organisations, namely the police, MPI, WorkSafe. This is an issue that we are all taking absolutely seriously, and I think that's what we've got to grasp up here, that we're not doing our job. The point that Ms. Spate has made consistently is that farmers do need to take some responsibility, and none of us are, staying away from that conversation. I personally am going up the coast next week to identify a number of areas where fencing is a problem. And we then have to work through the fencing order process that this council has in place, and we are doing that. And I think that keeps getting missed every time the conversation is being held. So, we're onto this. The council staff are supporting exactly the same messaging, because remember, this issue doesn't only exist on the state highway, it exists across the local network as well. So, and as the person leading it, I feel the frustration that everyone in this community feels, and I too get a text message time and time again about it. So, we are doing something.
Great, thank you for sharing that, because that's the first piece of information we've had, that someone was going up to look at the fence. So thanks very much, Ms. Harris, that's great. Yes.
Point of clarification. I'm not into personal stuff, Emma. Helen, I'm just putting the facts on the table as they are. So I'm not firing bullets at you guys. I'm just saying this needs to be done.
Right, thanks, Councillor Goodett. Councillor Arthur-Harder-Brown's been patiently waiting.
No, I was just going to say, I see it's been a long-standing issue in respect to you being proactive. So I just wondered if it's part of the solution, it was a finders keepers mechanism that could be added in there, just for those who are looking for some extra beef. But and with all due respect to wandering stock, it is highlighted many times over on our social media space, etc., because of safety. That's absolutely the bottom line, and we know that Waka Court Bay is constantly speaking to safety as an issue. But should the finders keepers approach work, then? But for me, I wanted to ask in respect to your speed changes, and I know there's some contingents, some work going into to identify that, but is that in conjunction with the police? Because we have a couple of residents who come in from time to time to let us know how fast, youngins mostly, but all users of an access way. One was clocked at 128 going down a residential street, which has a lot of elderly taking their grandchildren to school. So now residential spaces changes, are they identified through the police mechanism of concern for a used speeding youngin who uses it as a track? Is that how that works in the speed changes in residential, not motorways, highways, sorry. Is it in, do you talk to each other about that?
Well, with the local council we do, yes. So, and through the local council we get information about complaints. So we compare complaints, if you like, so that can influence our deployment decisions. What I would say is that, sometimes when we get really high speed, it's not all, changing the speed limit is not going to change the behaviour of that particular person. That's why the enforcement part is there. Now, if the road doesn't lend itself to speeding, then that's when we speak to the council and start to think about, well, perhaps we can redesign or put some calming measures in place if enforcement is not working. So enforcement works on an individual, and engineering works on the problem that is a bit wider. So yes, we do communicate.
Thank you. And I guess because as part of our talks around chicanes and measures, etc., as it was about the budgets for those things. But I just want to finish by thanking Emma. It's been a pleasure to have you around the table in this space, and wish you very well for the next stage and Linda into this space. And we look forward to hearty debate.
I've got one question on our emergency works update, and I appreciate that those are dropouts. Busby's Hill doesn't appear on that list. Would you even like to comment on, because that's a substantial piece of work that is creating some dangers on that hill when it's wet and sloppy?
Yeah, so that is one of our challenging mass earth movement sites that we're monitoring. We do have a plan in place. The team is working with Mr. Busby, and the work's due to start in end of winter. Yeah, September.
Why is it not on this list?
It's not an emergency work, it's a resilience under the PGF resilience work stream.
I guess my question is probably to that point, with the fact that so much has been done with PGF, and now the latest iteration of the PGF is less than 10% of the PGF's original size. So noting as well that the FAR rate is dropping for us, we have very, very little chance of maintaining the gains that we've managed to claw back in the last couple of years. I'd love to say that, you know, yay, we're really nailing this, but actually it feels like we've only just started to get some sense of normality back in our roading system. And then we see the PGF evaporate, the FAR rate drop. Basically, we're looking down the barrel of the darkest days of Tairāwhiti roads reappearing in the space of a few years. Is Whakakotahi comfortable with that?
We, as a Crown entity, we work within the parameters that are set by the Crown for us. Our income is predicated on decisions around the fuel excise duty and the road user charges. It's a hypothecated fund, and when those sources are not increased, we don't get an increase in funding. So the only increases into the land transport system currently are coming through direct to Crown investment for projects selected by the Crown. So we work within that, and we work with our council partners, and the teams work really hard through things like the Roading Efficiency Group to ensure that they're using the best possible practice to maintain our existing network and do the best we can. We know that if we don't keep investing to maintain that network, it creates other risks in terms of both the quality of the asset and the experience for people using it. But we will have to do the best we can. It's not an environment where we have an endless supply of funding that we can access.
Thank you. So you'd just like to move receipt of your, if there are no further questions, the regional update on Whakakotahi's report is a noting report, and the recommendation is on page 133. If there's a mover. Thank you, Councillor Burdett. There's a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Cranston. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. During the meeting, I've received a note that Mr. Gaddam did send his apologies. He'd been caught up in Te Aroa. So those who have signing authority, happy to move it. Thank you that his apology be received. Thank you, Councillor Cranston. Seconded, Councillor Worsnott. Thank you. So, the Mayor, you wish to speak?
I wanted to raise something which I have raised with the Chair and with Democracy Services, and it is in response to what Mr. Tupara said earlier, how our 10-year plan and how staff has worked, where we responded to feedback from the community. And what we did with our 10-year plan is we responded with funding for cycleways in our region, here in town, but also up in Uawa. And I wanted to make the suggestion, we have community advisors in our committee, that we advertise for a cycling position, a community advisor as well. And I just wanted to raise that with the committee, that's what I ask, and I hope it's all right with the committee that Ms. Con will put out an advertisement, and then the same process, whoever applies, the committee will decide then who that person is. So I just wanted to raise that and hope that's all right with everyone on the committee. A cycling advocate. Thank you.
Can I there's one other general business item that isn't really an item, but it just follows on to a question which I don't think we really got a clear answer about, and that is weeds on the highway and weeds on a road corridor. And there was a big effort made to deal with the weeds from Gisborne City to Tolaga Bay on State Highway 35. And I just wondered what follow-up, because it was a good effort, thank you very much. And certainly Argentine Pampas was dealt to. But there are small seedlings of it. It would be a pity if nothing happened and those small seedlings were allowed to grow to being big plants. So is it intended, and there's certainly some on the highway going south too, on Highway 2, I noticed last week. Is it intended to extend that the Weeds in the Corridor program and at least maintain what you've achieved in the last maybe 2 years ago program?
So we do align with the noxious weed plant pest management strategy that the council have. So we will have conversations with the council staff around which weeds they want to target. Obviously, we can't treat every single weed on every single bit of road reserve, but we do identify the ones that the council have identified as the ones you need to contain or eradicate, and we do work alongside that strategy.
Thank you.
So we would ideally, like we have sprayed the Pampas, and our expectation is they'll do another spray to target because we don't want it regrowing.
No, because it doesn't grow in raised pasture land, and it's really disappointing to see it growing on roadsides, and then it becomes like the reverse of the wandering animals. It becomes a problem for the landowner because it seed spread into pasture where it wasn't before. So we know we all need to work together, and that the wandering animals is definitely the responsibility of landowners. Thank you. Is there any other item anyone wishes to raise?
We miss her smiling face at this table. To be fair, I never saw her once in the 3 years lose her cool. Man, talk about resilient and tuturu waka kotahi, which means you're so defensive of them, even when they were wrong. So, thank you for your input. Part of this committee, and welcome, Linda.
No, thank you very much. I want to endorse those remarks, and we wish you well. Is it a national role that you'll have in the state? Did I protect?
Two parts to my role, the Greater Wellington and Top of the South, the same role, and then the national role working with New Zealand Police on improving road safety. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, we do wish you well, and thank you for your perseverance and coming to Tairāwhiti through many challenging times. And we generally always had something to have a go about, but that's because we are passionate about the roads and the service for our community. And we do welcome Ms. Stewart, and thank you very much. And we hope that you will certainly spend time, I know you told me privately, but if you can tell us all that you'll spend time familiarising yourself with the significant issues that are issues for Tairāwhiti roads.
Absolutely the intention. So my first quarter in my role is getting immersed in the whole of the region that I cover and taking the time to spend time with people like yourselves, not just in these formal settings, but as well I've had quite a few offers to get out and about on the network and get to know some of the great work that you've already done, as well as some of the challenges you face.
Thank you.
And see you again soon.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Tupero to close the meeting, please?
Mino e no tātou rera spray. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atua whai o tō tātou ariki o Ukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairo tapu, ake. Āmine. Kia ora.